Welcome to Holistic Accountant Podcast, where we aim to showcase how adopting a holistic approach in accounting and tax maximizes value for clients. Beyond traditional tasks like preparing financial statements and tax returns, a holistic accountant focuses on offering advice that maximizes personal wealth on an after-tax basis. If you enjoy this episode, please consider leaving a rating and sharing it with those who might also benefit. And to ensure you stay updated, subscribe to our weekly email. The link is in the show notes. Okay, today, Mena, I'd like to talk about customer feedback surveys. Really, they are, I think, a critical tool in building a business. And really, the answer is that if you don't have customers beating your door down in terms of wanting to buy your product or service, then arguably you could greatly benefit from receiving more customer feedback to work out which parts of your business that you want to improve. And I think a lot of businesses do customer feedback, engage in that process. However, not a lot of businesses really do it well. And about 10-15 years ago, I went to a seminar hosted by Fred Reichheld, and he is the guy that developed what's called Net Promoter Score, or NPS. He used to work at Bain & Co., which is a large US consulting firm, and based on his empirical research, so what he did is he worked out what is the best predictor of the likelihood of someone referring to your business and also being a loyal customer. And they tested a lot of different questions they could ask, and what they did is they concluded that the best question to ask is, on a rating of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our product or service to a friend or colleague? And based on their empirical research across many, many companies, that was the best predictor of both a loyal customer and a customer that's going to provide referrals. And of course, you can rate between 0 and 10, and the way he classified the ratings was that 9 or a 10 was called a promoter. These are highly satisfied customers that are most likely to refer to you. 7 to 8 are passives, so they're satisfied but not particularly enthusiastic about your business. And so really what you want is promoters. They're the ones that really, your service or product is remarkable, worthy of remark, and that's what you really need to get those 7 or 8s to a 9 or a 10. And anyone that rated 0 to 6 was a detractor. They're actually quite dissatisfied with your business and probably are spreading negative feedback about it. And so that's potentially harmful. And to work out the Net Promoter Score, what you do is you add up the number of clients that rated you a 9 or a 10 out of 10, and then subtract the detractors, subtract the clients that rated you between 0 and 6, and that's your Net Promoter Score. And so you can just Google this in terms of what industry averages are, because they're different for different industries, of course, but in financial services, the average NPS score is around 20 to 30. We've been tracking NPS in our business for a long time. We're about 60, so of course we're doing really well in that space.
So the next thing is to ask yourself, what are 1 to 2 things I could change to achieve a higher rating? And don't be afraid to actually put this in your feedback survey too. It's important to get the feedback from customers because they're thinking in a very different line of thought than what you are as a consumer, whereas you're sort of thinking from a business sense. So Zappos obsessed about their customer satisfaction under the late Tony Hsieh. And 10 years after his leadership, the business actually sold to Amazon for $1.2 billion. So it's really crucial to always ask not only yourself but your customers 1 or 2 things to achieve a higher rating.
Yeah, it's a good point, man. I remember Tony Hsieh telling a story about Boss, because as you said, they absolutely obsessed about customer service to the point where the customer satisfaction rating was much more important than the profitability of the individual customer, which, they were trying to scale an online business, of course. So that's a different strategy. I'm not suggesting that customer profitability is more important than feedback in every business. And I say for smaller businesses, it's not. But for example, he told a story about a lady that would order shoes on a Friday or towards the end of the week and then always return those shoes on a Monday. And they worked out that obviously what she was doing is buying the shoes, wearing them on the weekend and then returning them on the Monday. Now, any other business would have sacked that customer. They'd refuse to deal with them. But, Tony said that, to my mind, that was a great outcome because she'd be telling everyone about Zappos. She'd be telling everyone about what she did. But most of the people that she'd be telling would be thinking, well, that's great, but I'm not going to do that. But she's still spreading the Zappos name. So I thought it was a really good story to share.
Yeah, it's a good example. And it's really important to keep your feedback short and sweet. No one wants to be spending a whole lot of time answering in detail questions about what you want to know about your business. It should be no more than 2 to 3 questions, and that way people are more inclined to actually spend a little amount of time just addressing the questions in a short, concise manner.
Yeah, you're getting some valuable feedback, so you really want to respect your customers. And, how many times have you completed a feedback survey and either given good or bad feedback but never heard anything of it? We just think sometimes these feedback surveys go into the ether and, no one ever looks at them, no one ever does anything. So I always think it's good to actually reply to anyone that completes your feedback survey to say, thank you, thanks for completing it, really pleased that you had a great experience. But if they're giving you negative feedback, it's even more important to reply. And I've found that responding to negative feedback, if when you receive it, is actually one of the best things that you can do for your business. Because quite often the customer's giving you negative feedback, but they don't understand necessarily what has led to that customer experience. Now, it could be that you've messed up, and I think you've got to own it and you've got to come back and say, yeah, we messed up, we didn't deliver the experience that you were hoping for. But I find that mostly it's because there's been a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, and it allows you then to rectify that. Well, still taking ownership of the experience. You don't want to say, oh, look, thanks for the feedback, but you're wrong. But just help them understand, what led to their experience. And I find that quite often it can actually lead to a great opportunity to turn that customer around. So if you didn't survey that customer, they'd be an unhappy customer, probably a detractor, talking negatively about your business. You've then created an opportunity to really explore what led to their experience, and you turn that customer around and they end up being an advocate. And I think people really appreciate businesses that really care about how their customers feel and then actually respond in person to their feedback.
And if there's a common theme in terms of a pitfall or a weakness in your business, you need to ask about it. For example, in our business, when we had sort of mistakes in our mortgage applications, we really honed in on it and actually asked ourselves, what can we do in our systems and processes to improve it? So it sometimes gives you the hard truth around your business about what's going wrong. And it's only up to you at that point in time to improve your systems and processes to improve your overall business as a whole. And it's important to be careful with how you word your questions. So test it first, run it through ChatGPT. I know it sounds strange, but it could, pick up sort of weaknesses and ambiguities in the actual question itself. Like, for example, I remember when Stuart sent out his wealth coach surveys, where some clients were sort of only on board for about 3 or 6 months. And the question posed was, how would you rate your service, or are you happy with your service? I think it was, Stuart, is that right?
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
And of course, a lot of customers came back or clients came back and said that, they've only been here for 3 to 6 months. It's too early to ascertain. Whereas how that question should have really been worded is, if you've been a client for a period of time, are you content with the service, and would you recommend the service to someone else, as an example? So it's really important to be careful of how you word your questions. And sometimes you might have a survey for newly held customers or clients and for ongoing ones. So you might have different questions that pose different sort of queries to get more information from your client base to establish a better data source.
The other thing I want to talk about is what you do with the feedback. If you get feedback from a customer saying, look, we think you should offer this product or service, we think you should do X, Y, or Z. The question is, do you listen to that? And the answer really depends on whether the service relates to your target client or your business strategy or where you're aiming to take your business. Sometimes listening to every customer request means that you spread yourself too thin and you don't actually then appeal to your customer target. And that can be challenging. And so we've got to resist that temptation to be everything to everyone, because as soon as you want to be everything to everyone, you're everything to no one. And a good example is the market's been asking Apple for cheaper iPhones for a long period of time. Of course, they just get more and more expensive every year. And I think the new model's north of $2,000 now. It's an expensive phone, right? And so it would make sense that if Apple could come out with a $700 phone, they'd probably sell a lot of them. But they've never done it. They've resisted their temptation, the economic temptation, to do that. And as a result, whilst they only got about 60% of the market in the US in terms of mobile phones, it's estimated that the profit they generate from selling those iPhones is more than 80% of the industry's profit. They've stuck to their niche, they've stuck to their target, and they've not listened to that customer feedback. So I think it's good to keep in mind when you do get that feedback, you've got to ask yourself, is this what our target client wants? Will this make our target client happy? If so, do it. But if it's going to distract you from your core business, then of course you wouldn't necessarily do that.
We have a common saying here at Pro Solution is to offer our clients a remarkable service. So what that means is a service that's actually worthy of remark. We always ask ourselves a question, and it's based on a recent blog by Seth Godin, which we're big fans of. And it asks, have you recommended Pro Solution within the last, for example, 90 days? So instead of asking, would you recommend Pro Solution, it's asking, have you? So as an example, you could put 4 categories in your survey where you say, yes, I have enthusiastically recommend Pro Solution as an example, or yes, I have recommended Pro Solution to others, but not necessarily as a strong recommendation, or no, I haven't mentioned Pro Solution to anyone, or not applicable, I haven't had the opportunity to share my experience with others, or I don't feel comfortable talking about my dealings with Pro Solution. So that way you get a lot more information from your customer base as to how comfortable they are and how satisfied they are with your service.
Yeah, we'll include the link in the show notes to the Seth Godin blog, by the way. But I think it was a really thought-provoking blog because asking, would you refer, is that really important, or have you referred? I think that's far more important. And, you know, if you're not, again, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, if you're not having your doors beaten down, clearly your customers aren't referring. So let's find out why not. And that's the thing, right? With these surveys, it's not just a case of, oh, everyone does customer surveys, so we should do one too. Of course, that could be part of it, but really, what are you going to do with the data? You want to make sure before you start serving your customer, you've got a good process for dealing with that data. So are you going to reward people that give you a really high rating? Maybe in fact ask them to complete a Google review, and if they want to do that, maybe you can reward them some way in terms of offering a discount or some additional product or service or so forth. What process do you have in place to fix problems? Are you going to use the data to reward staff? You know, maybe you can use that in terms of giving feedback to staff or rewarding them. And of course, it gives you some great data to use to create social proof, you know, to advertise to potential customers. But I think it's good not only just, okay, I'm looking for problems here in terms of that's why I'm doing the survey, but also what you're doing is looking for some good feedback and how will you use that feedback. Anyway, that's a lot on feedback surveys, but we think they're a really important part of business, and we don't think, at least our observation, a lot of businesses are doing them very well and using the data very well, and hopefully that's a bit of food for thought. And until next week, bye for now.